That joy is mine, and it is now complete. He must become greater, I must become less. The one who comes from above is above all. The one who is from the earth belongs to the earth and speaks as one from the earth.
Okay, we can stop there. All right, so interesting little story in the chapter 3 is we see that John the Baptist is baptizing, and then they tell him that Christ is baptizing, and that people are going to him. So one of the things in the church that we talk about with St. John the Baptist is we say that he is the greatest among women. Right? This is what Christ said about him. Truly, there's no one born who's greater among women, which is quite a resounding, statement by Christ, right? To be the greatest among women. In fact, did you know that St. John the Baptist is the only person other than St. Mary and Jesus whose birthday we celebrate? So in the church, we don't ever celebrate birthdays. We only celebrate when people pass away, right? Like most like President's Day, Martin Luther King Day, those are all birthdays. But we don't do that in the church, other than 3 people. Jesus' birthday, it's Christmas. St. Mary's birthday, and St. John the Baptist, right? And in fact, the only people we ever say intercede, in the hymns of the church, we say, pray to the Lord on our behalf for all the saints, but to St. John the Baptist and to St. Mary and the angels, we say intercede on our behalf. So it's like a higher level. It's like he is truly the greatest born among women. And it's quite something. It's quite striking that we say that about him. Why? Why do we make such a big deal about St. John the Baptist? And what's interesting is we only hear about his ministry for how long? Like 6 months. He didn't do much. That's it. 6 months. And when we think about St. John the Baptist, we think about his fiery spirit, right? He stood up to everyone. He called the Pharisees, you brood of vipers, and he went after people. He's gung-ho. He told the king off, right? He says, you can't marry your brother's wife. And, nobody ever stood up to the king, right? You saw what happened to St. John the Baptist when he stood up to the king. They cut his head off, right? You just don't do that. And he said some amazing things. Very strong, very decisive, very gutsy, not scared of anybody, right? But, oops, I think I touched that. But is that why we celebrate him? Do we celebrate him for what he did? What he said? Or do we celebrate him for who he was and what he is? And today's gospel gives us an answer to why we celebrate St. John the Baptist so much. Why we think so highly of him. I mean, St. John the Baptist said 100 words. That's it. He didn't say much. Right? You read everything about St. John the Baptist. 6 months, 100 words later, and here we are, the greatest among women. In fact, when you see an icon of St. John the Baptist, what does an icon of St. John the Baptist look like? He has wings, like an angel. Amazing, right, that we make such a big deal about him. And today's gospel gives us this. So it started innocently enough. Verse 26, it says, Rabbi, the man who was with you on the other side of the Jordan, the one you testified, look, he is baptizing and everyone is going to him. Ouch. Is John the Baptist a man? Yeah, he's just a regular guy. Now, if you were to tell you've got one job. You're John the Baptist. You baptize people, right? You have one job. And now they say, you know what? Everyone's going to him for the one job you have. You're the baptized guy, and now people are going to someone else. Doesn't that hurt? What if someone said to me, Marchie, your sermons are really good, but, Abuna John's are way better than yours. I'd rather listen to him than you. Ouch, right? What if I told my wife, I like your cookies, but man, her cookies are way better than your cookies. Ouch, and a fight, right? So, These things are hard to hear, right? It's hard to hear that someone's better than you. It's hard to hear, especially when you're trying really hard, and someone says, "Oh yeah, she's prettier than you are. He's smarter than you are. He's stronger than you are. He's a better deacon than you are." Whatever. So these things hurt, and now when they say to him, "Everyone is going to him," don't you think that stings him a little bit? Doesn't that kind of suck? To hear everyone is going to him. Any human being would be affected by that kind of statement. And so other than being just true, that statement just hurts. It just hurts to hear it, right? And what does it hurt? It's pride, right? It stings a little. It hurts his ego. And then what did John reply? He has this great reply. He says, "A person can only receive what is given to them from above." Nice. So now they're saying, you know what, everyone's going to him. What do you think? And he says, a person can only receive what is given to him from above. So what's he saying? He's saying, I don't have what he has. I only have what I have. And what I have, I was given. And what I was given came from heaven. Everything we have is a gift. Wow. What a realization. Everything I have is a gift. It's a gift from heaven. And what do you do to deserve a gift? Nothing. What do you do to deserve your birthday gift? You stay alive, right? That's pretty much it. That's all you got. That's the only prerequisite to get a birthday present, right? Stay alive, right? And you stay alive another year, they give you a gift. You didn't do anything for a gift. You don't deserve a gift. Most of you don't deserve anything. And so here he's saying, I can take pride in nothing. Why? What am I? I'm dust. Everything I have is a gift. Everything I do is a gift. Everything God allows me to do is a gift. And he can take it and he can do whatever he wants with it. It's not mine. And so every gift I have is for the glory of God. It's not about me. And that's really important. That's really hard to do in the service every once in a while. Sometimes, as a servant, it becomes about me. What do people think of me? What's my legacy? How do people think of me? Am I popular? Do people like me? Do people like it when I serve? Do people benefit from me? Me. It's an issue. And so when we start thinking about our legacy and how we're received, and what do the parents think about us, and what does the Buna think about us, and what does the bishop think about us, and what does the Metro think about us, and what does everybody think about us? We have a problem, right? Because there's just a lot of us there. There's a lot of me in that, right? And when we think about what made Satan fall, it's one thing, pride, right? So every sin is really the same sin. There's only one sin, right? It's pride. It's the ego. It's the self. Everything's about being selfish. And so then St. John's response is truly spectacular. Because then he continues, the bride belongs to the bridegroom. What does that even mean? What does that mean, the bride belongs to the bridegroom? Who's the bridegroom? It's Christ. And who's the bride? It's us, the people. So we belong to the bridegroom. So he responds, he says, the bride belongs to the bridegroom. Christ has the bride. She belongs to him. We belong to him. Can I be jealous? Can I be at my friend's wedding, watching him get married, and think to myself, man, I wish I was marrying her instead? Not if I'm a good friend. No one ever thinks that, right? In fact, it's the opposite. He says he's happy when he hears, the friend rejoices when he hears the bridegroom's voice, right? He's coming, and he's at his wedding, and he's coming to take his bride, right? She's not my bride. She's his bride. So the people don't belong, to me. They belong to Christ, right? So if I start thinking, well, I really want to give a good talk, and I really want to serve, and I really want the people to like me, well, I got a problem, don't I? Right? Because they're not mine. You're not my kids, are you? You're God's kids. Right? I just serve God's kids. And if I want to take people away from that abuna, and this abuna wants to take people away, and that servant wants the kids to like him or her more, well then what are we doing? Right? Because now the bride, the bride belongs to the bridegroom, and I'm just the friend. So he says the bridegroom rejoices greatly. The friend of the bridegroom who stands by and listens for him rejoices greatly when he hears the bridegroom's voice. So when the people tempted John and they said, everyone's going to him, his response, they aren't mine, they're his. Let him go to him. What an amazing response. It's very, very hard to do because it shows what? No ego. Right? It's completely selfless and very thoughtful. And he gives them this great example of a bride and a bridegroom and a friend at a wedding. And he says, am I going to be upset that the bride is marrying the bridegroom? They're supposed to get married. Why would I be upset? I'm just standing. I'm just a guest, right? So when we start thinking about the service, say, Anthony, ta'ala khush, you're late. It's okay. It's all right. I'm sure he's a good example in other parts of his life. Malish. I'm teaching him humility. I'm teaching him how to be dust. And hamsah bil ard is basically what the objective. Of course, he has stuff on me he could say that could just ruin my life, but he's so humble, he's not going to say. All right, so let's start kind of making this more practical. In the church, do people attack each other for their service? Yeah. Do people get jealous of each other's service? Yeah. I see someone who's doing a really great job. He's very successful, or she's very successful. And I think, she's not that good. I don't know why everyone's listening to her. I don't know why everyone likes him. My voice is better than him. I know that him better than he does. Right? Do people even attack each other for their gifts? Someone's given a gift. Voice, ability to speak, art, whatever the gift is. Love. And then people attack them for their gift. People do that? Yeah. Is that okay? It happens. When the sinful woman dumped the spices on Christ, such a beautiful act. What did Judas say? He attacked her for it. Here she is dumping everything she has on Christ. And he attacks her for it. He says, if you're really thoughtful, you would have given it to the poor. Put it in the box. Was he even thinking about Christ at all? He was thinking about himself. Do we do that sometimes in the service? We do. And yet John the Baptist, he responded to the people's temptation with style. It was very classy and perspective. It's like he's thought about this. Is that easy to do? Is it easy to give up your legacy, your thing? You have one thing, right? I mean, I know people who are like, my job is to bring the shorya, right? I have one job. And heaven help anybody who brings the shorya instead of him, right? He will just knock you down and stomp on you, right? I bring the shorya. Don't you ever take my job. It's hard to give up your legacy. It's hard to give up what you're known for. That cuts to the ego. That cuts deep. And like when someone at work takes credit for your work, how do you feel about that? When someone in school on a group project takes credit for your work on a group project, how do you feel about that? It's not pleasant. When you have a really good idea and the professor says, what a great idea, and you go, yes, and then the other person says, yes, thank you, I thought of that. You're like, oh, you piece of garbage, right? You just want to rip his head off. Why do you want to rip his head off or her head off? You have an ego, your pride. You're like, this is me. That's my idea. It's my legacy. That's my grade. That's my fame and fortune, right? And that's really when it starts cutting. But yet when they did it to St. John the Baptist, wow, he didn't even flinch. And then St. John ends it all with the verse that ends all verses. 7 words. To me, it's the summary of the entire Christian life. You know, if you're only going to read 7 words in the Bible, just read these 7 and just do them over and over and over again. He must increase and I must decrease. That's it. That's the whole thing. If you want to summarize the Christian struggle, he must increase and I must decrease. And if we get this line and we live by it, there's nothing really left to do more than that. You don't need to learn all the verses about, everything else and read lots of commentaries and learn lots of things. No, live by that. He must increase and I must decrease. That'll teach you how to serve. It'll teach you how to fast. It'll teach you how to pray. It'll teach you how to love. It'll teach you how to discipline. It'll teach you everything. Just keep repeating it to yourself. So in the very famous book, The Grain of Wheat by Father Matthew the Poor, he says the grain of wheat has to fall to the ground and die before it grows and lives. The grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies. These are the words of Christ. And so he focuses on the I must decrease part. The Lord wants us to destroy the old self, the old man, the old Adam, the sinful man. And this is the old man of sin and lust and pride, false freedom. His ego is his only concern, his thoughts, his labors, his hates, his griefs, his joys, his peace, his fear, his glory, and even his worship. And this is the man we have to destroy. This is the Christian battle. It isn't about doing a bunch of things and achieving a bunch of stuff and running around, right? You guys remember the story of Mary and Martha? Martha was doing what? Running around. And we have a lot of stuff at church to do that involves a lot of running around. And you have to be careful, right? I see you guys are setting up for the festival outside. I don't want to say anything bad about the festival. Some honey, right? But you got to be aware of yourself. Am I just running around? Or am I sitting at the feet of Christ like Mary did? And when Martha was running around doing great things, she was making tea and kahk for all the visitors. I'm sure it was kahk. What did Christ say? Mary has chosen the better path. She didn't do jack. She didn't serve at all. She didn't do a thing. She just sat at the feet of Christ. And sometimes, we get caught up running around. As I'm driving up here in massive traffic, I think to myself, what am I doing with my life? Why am I running all the way out to St. John, West Covina Church on a Monday night, God-forsaken traffic? Why am I just running around? Why don't I just sit at the feet of Christ and save the gas? But sometimes we're called to do these things. So I'm going to read to you a part that I really like about this breaking of the self. He says, he talks about dying to the self. And I want to just read you the quote because it's just so magnificent. All right. I don't know if you can read it, but better. All right. He says, this is a very hard process. So God uses all possible measures, direct or indirect, to attack the self. He applies constant pressure, a pressure which never ceases. God could choose different means, but is content to act in this way. For he has one goal: to destroy man's pride and its power, and to break the bonds that imprison the spirit of the new man. The self is under siege within the body, seeking to avoid God's blows against it. It may appear at first to sicken, but then it recovers. So he's saying sometimes the self, the ego, is hiding inside the body, and it avoids God's blows against it, and it appears sick, but then it comes back. So God constantly changes his means of attack. At home, for example, he may use parents, brothers, sisters. At school or in the street, he may use one's friends. If these means fail, he uses a person's employer or rivals, or else his job and his reputation. If such methods also fail, he uses the power of natural creation, animals and insects, by inflicting weakness or illness. Finally, if all things fail, man is delivered into the hands of Satan, who will humiliate him and apply such discipline as God in his love has not used. The devil is merciless in his activity, and thus man is at last humbled and brought down to the dust. It's an amazing quote. God is constantly, directly or indirectly, attacking the self, every part of our ego. And he doesn't stop. And every time you adapt to one type of attack, you get really good at one kind of blow, he comes at you a different way. And it just doesn't stop. One of the ways that really blew me out of the water is when he said he uses animals and insects. And I thought to myself, insects? Where's Abuna Metta? He's in a monastery. What insects are in the monastery? Mosquitoes. And I thought to myself, he even thought of the mosquitoes. You guys ever sleep with mosquitoes? You don't sleep. They just keep buzzing. And it's unrelenting. And Abuna Metta, even when the mosquitoes were coming at him, he thought to himself, God is using this to destroy my ego. The ego that wants to sleep and be comfortable and say, why can't I just have a good night's sleep? I deserve it. Amazing. And so this is where, when St. Paul says, it is a dreadful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. What is he talking about? A dreadful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. He continues, remember those earlier days. Oh, I can read it here. Remember those earlier days when you endured in a great conflict full of suffering. Sometimes you were publicly exposed to insult and persecution, and at other times you stood side by side with those who were so treated. You endured great conflict full of suffering and publicly exposed to insult and persecution. This is at the hands of God. This insult and persecution and suffering. Why? Breaking the self. Breaking the old self. And what does this mean? Once we go into the hands of God, it's sort of like the story of the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. When God took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, what did he do? He broke them, right? He took those 5 loaves and he broke them. And it turns out you can't be distributed to other people until you're broken. The only way if you're just a whole loaf, you just feed one person. But the more God breaks you, the more people you feed. So the people who fed the most, the big saints, the big servants, were the most broken people. Broken over and over and over. At whose hands? Christ's hands. That's what he does. So when I hear about St. John the Baptist, I hear about a man who is dead. He showed us what death is. He showed us what death to the self really looks like. And when they mocked him and they said, people are going to the other guy, He said, yeah, the bride is going to the bridegroom. Ain't nothing wrong with that. I want to read to you a spiritual quote from one of the fathers. He says, obedience is the veil under which you must disappear. Obedience is the veil under which you must disappear. Learn to be obedient and learn to disappear. Less of me, more of him. That's the objective. He must increase and I must decrease. So how do we look more like Christ? How do we look more like, people say, I want to be the image of Christ. I want to be in his likeness and his image. How do I do that? Well, it turns out Christ is already inside. You don't have to work hard to get there. He's already there. Didn't Christ say the kingdom of heaven is where? Inside you. So what do I have to do to look more like Christ? It just has to be less me. I have to get out of the way. That's all I have to do. Less me, more him. Less me, more him. Less of my own ego and my own pride and my own desires and my own will. And we should do it like this and we should do it like that. And this is the right way. No, you're doing it wrong because I know what's better. A lot of I's in our spiritual life, in the service, in our communication with other people. A lot of selfishness. Right? How many times have you been with people who every time you say something, they go, no, do it like this. No, we should do it like this. You should do, no, this is wrong. No, do it this way. You're like, when are you going to stop? When are you going to stop talking? When are you going to let anyone do anything other than the way you want to do it? I want to talk to you I'll end with a story about someone named Sister Claire. Has anyone ever heard of her, Sister Claire? She's a Catholic nun. She passed away in 2016 from an earthquake in Ecuador. She's an interesting story. You should see her story on YouTube. She's very young. She's like in her 20s when she passed away, maybe 30. She actually showed up to a pilgrimage trip in Spain with a bunch of cigarettes and alcohol because she wanted to get away from her parents. So it was like a mission trip. So they're like, I'll go bring a bunch of booze and cigarettes and they can't catch me. And that's how her story started. And then she met a nun. And her obedience and surrender to God was stunning. It was really something else. Every morning she got out a blank piece of paper and said, God can ask me anything today. Ask me anything and I'll do it. And no matter what she did, she didn't think of herself. What she felt didn't matter at any given moment. She didn't wait to feel better. She was actually very sick, but no one knew it. She just did things. And she would do things to the point where she had nothing left in reserve. It was about to collapse. It was so tired. And there are videos of her, people would shoot cell phone videos, bad quality back then, of her. And you see her just playing the guitar and singing. And then after, the song ends, she just turns and collapses because she's so tired. But you would have no idea because she was smiling the whole time. She couldn't do things halfway. She would say, we have to be saints. It's all or nothing. We can't remain in mediocrity. We have to fight with all our strength against all the obstacles that impede us from growing. I love this quote. It reminds me of St. John the Baptist. All or nothing. That's who St. John the Baptist was. He's an all or nothing kind of guy. In Christianity, you're either fire or you're nothing. Those are the options. There's no middle, right? In the book of Revelation, it says, he was lukewarm and I spit him out of my mouth. Either fire or nothing. So I'm going to read to you this quote that she said, and I'll end with that, and you guys can ask me questions, or you can just let me go home. I'm kidding. She said, sometimes it's easy to say yes. I want Christ to enter me. But this doesn't occur in 5 minutes. You can't just go in front of the tabernacle and say, now, and it's done and over with. And he's there inside you. In my experience, it's a fairly painful process. In order for Christ to live in me, in order for him to dwell inside and take complete possession of my soul, he has to step on and crush the serpent, the old nature, my ego of Claire Crockett. This hurts a lot, sometimes a ton. He has to get rid of everything that isn't him. And there's a lot, by the way. And sometimes my despicable self runs after things that he is trying to get rid my soul of. My will, my likes, my attachments, my ideas, my plans, and that hurts. Even though I know it's for my own good, it stings. It doesn't mean that when I say, let me die so you can live, I'm just kidding. No, I'm serious when I say it. But please, give me your strength, your grace, your love, your saints, your mother, your heart, so I can lose all fear, so I can open the doors to you. I just love this quote. And that's the process. And the outcome, if you're successful, it's nothing but joy. When I've given up the old man, the old self, that's the state we're called to be in. She said, what makes the Lord happy is when I let him save me. And my happiness is in fact that God desired to save me. He does everything, moves everything, and permits everything in order to save me. I have to disappear. He must increase, and I must decrease. So I'll end this with this thought. We call St. John the Baptist the forerunner. That means the one who came to prepare the way. And so it's an interesting choice that God sends the one to prepare the way who doesn't say a lot. Like I said before, the one who prepares the way for the living God, for Christ, says 100 words. And basically all he said was repent. So more importantly than what he said is who he was. How do we prepare the way for him? He must increase and I must decrease. I'll end there. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Yes, go ahead.
I understand dying to others and putting others first, but what about the idea of you have to fill your cup to fill others, or to light your candle? No, that one's the other way. Do you hear what I mean? How do you find a balance between both of those things?
You mean the microphone was right there the whole time and you didn't even use it? I think what you said about you have to fill your cup before you can fill others. I think that's absolutely true, right? And the way you fill the cup is similar to what I said, which is you just get out of the way, right? When I fill the cup with myself, my own ability, my own pride, my own strength, that's the problem. Right? I mean, St. Paul says it the best, right? He says, my strength is perfected in weakness. Right? So you're not going to get saved by your strength. You're going to get saved by your weakness. Right? So filling myself is recognizing my weakness, is allowing God to fill the cup. Right? To put it under the waterfall of God's grace and say, fill that. Right? And the more I'm out of the way, the more he can fill. Right? But, as St. Peter says, God opposes the proud. Right? The opposite of death to the self and the ego. Right? God opposes the proud, but gives strength to the humble. Right? So the way we get to God's strength, the way we fill our cup is humility. And then God fills. Ultimately, just practically, God can't fill somebody who's prideful. There's no space. And it's not good for the person, right? They're just going to think they're great, right? Did I answer your question? And sometimes I think you can go down a dangerous path with that thinking, because sometimes people will say things like, well, before you can teach, you have to know, you have to learn, you have to reach some spiritual state before you can. What is that state? What is that knowledge? Is it I learned a bunch of curriculum and I can cite history? Does that make me a good servant? Or is the knowledge of myself and my own weakness, and the knowledge that God is all in all? Right? Now, doesn't that make me the best servant? And that's what allows me to fill others. Because if I'm full of myself, and I learned a bunch of stuff, and I'm really good, and I passed the test, and I know I got a higher score than anybody else, then what am I filling people with? Me? My own ego? My own knowledge? My own pride? And we've all heard talks from people who are full of pride. It's not pleasant. Right? You're just like, shut up. Like, what? Nobody wants to hear this. And it's it's counterproductive. The pizza's here. But look. Don't eat it all, Anthony. See you eyeing it, bro. Does anybody else have any questions? Abuna's going to call on you. You know he is.